Co-option is just handwaving in biology. There is no step-by-step molecular proof for county-option in the biological literature. Biological creatures have many nanomolecular machines that are irreducibly complex. To avoid this obvious conclusion, some atheists appeal to co-option. Here, I will examine the concept, explain why it falls short as a scientific explanation, and show that the absence of molecular proof for co-option highlights the need for intelligent design as a better explanation for the complexity of biological systems. 1. What is county-option? Co-option refers to an alleged process by which an existing biological structure or component is allegedly repurposed to serve a new function. In the context of evolutionary theory, proponents of Darwinism argue that complex systems, such as molecular machines and biochemical pathways, could have arisen through the modification and repurposing of simpler systems that served different roles in ancestral organisms. For example, it is often suggested that components of the bacterial flagellum, a molecular motor that certain bacteria use for movement, might have evolved through the co-option of simpler protein structures that were originally part of other biological systems, such as the type 3 secretion system, TTSS, a molecular machine used by bacteria to inject toxins into host cells. In theory, these simpler systems could have been adapted for new functions, eventually giving rise to the intricate, irreducibly complex systems we observe today. However, this idea of co-option remains speculative, and there is no molecular evidence in the biological literature demonstrating a step-by-step pathway by which complex systems evolve through this process. 2. The hand-waving nature of co-option. When evolutionists invoke co-option to explain the origin of complex biological systems, they often do so without providing concrete, empirical evidence to support the claim. This reliance on co-option, without demonstrating how specific systems evolved through it, amounts to hand-waving, a rhetorical move designed to give the appearance of an explanation without actually providing one. Lack of molecular evidence. The most significant problem with co-option is the absence of detailed, step-by-step molecular proof in the biological literature. Co-option is often proposed as a hypothetical solution to the problem of irreducible complexity, but when we look for actual data showing how a biological system was co-opted from simpler systems, the evidence is lacking. There are no detailed studies showing how a specific molecular machine, protein complex, or biochemical pathway evolved through the gradual modification of pre-existing parts. For co-option to be a legitimate scientific explanation, researchers would need to show a clear, stepwise pathway by which simpler components were repurposed and gradually modified into a functional, irreducibly complex system. This pathway would need to demonstrate how each intermediate stage provided a selective advantage, ensuring that it was preserved and passed on to future generations through natural selection. However, such step-by-step molecular pathways have not been observed or documented in the literature. The bacterial flagellum, a case in point. The bacterial flagellum, one of the most famous examples of an irreducibly complex system, serves as a prime example of how co-option is invoked without sufficient proof. Some proponents of co-option argue that the type 3 secretion system, TTSS, might represent a simpler precursor to the flagellum. According to this hypothesis, the proteins used in the TTSS were co-opted and repurposed over time to form the components of the bacterial flagellum. However, there is no direct molecular evidence showing how the transition from the TTSS to the flagellum occurred. Even if certain proteins in the TTSS are similar to those in the flagellum, this does not demonstrate how a functional motor could have been assembled through natural selection. The flagellum requires a rotor, stator, propeller, and several other components, all of which must work together for the motor to function. There is no evidence showing how these components could have evolved from a simpler system like the TTSS through co-option. Moreover, some evolutionary biologists have argued that the TTSS evolved from the flagellum, rather than the other way around. This raises further doubts about whether co-option can explain the origin of irreducibly complex systems like the bacterial flagellum. 3. Why county-option is an inadequate explanation. The failure of co-option to provide step-by-step molecular proof in the biological literature highlights its inadequacy as an explanation for the complexity of biological systems. Here are some key reasons why co-option falls short. No functional intermediates. For co-option to be a valid explanation, each intermediate stage in the evolutionary process must provide a functional advantage. However, in many cases of complex biological systems, it is impossible to imagine how or demonstrate how partially formed systems could provide any selective benefit. A partially formed bacterial flagellum, for example, would not function as a motor, and thus would provide no advantage to the organism. The same is true for other irreducibly complex systems, such as the blood clotting cascade, where all components must be present and functional for the system to work. Without functional intermediates, natural selection cannot preserve the intermediate stages needed to form a complex system. This makes co-option an unlikely explanation for the origin of irreducibly complex systems. Coordinated changes required. Another problem with co-option is that it requires multiple, coordinated changes to occur simultaneously for a new function to emerge. In most biological systems, changes to one part of the system require corresponding changes to other parts for the system to remain functional. Random mutations are unlikely to produce the precise, coordinated changes needed to repurpose an existing system for a new function. For example, in the bacterial flagellum, modifying one protein in the motor would not be enough to repurpose it for a new function. Changes would also be required in other components, such as the rotor, stator, and driveshaft. These changes would need to occur in a highly coordinated manner, which is unlikely to happen through random mutations and natural selection. 4. Intelligent design is a better explanation. In contrast to the speculative and unsupported nature of co-option, intelligent design provides a coherent and well-supported explanation for the origin of complex biological systems. The concept of irreducible complexity, where systems require all of their parts to be present and functioning for the system to work, points to a designer who intentionally arranged the components of these systems to fulfill a specific function. Just as a watch requires a watchmaker to arrange its gears and springs into a functional timepiece, biological systems like the bacterial flagellum require a designer to arrange their components into a fully functional system. The purposeful arrangement of parts in these systems reflects the foresight and intelligence of a mind, not the random, unguided processes proposed by Darwinian evolution. 5. Theological implications. Design points to God. As a Christian, the failure of co-option to provide a satisfactory explanation for the origin of complex biological systems reinforces the belief that life was created by a designer, God. The Bible teaches that God created the world with wisdom and purpose, as reflected in passages like Colossians chapter 1 verse 16, which says, "For by him all things were created. Things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. All things have been created through him and for him." The intricacy and complexity of biological systems point to design, not random processes. The absence of step-by-step molecular proof for co-option highlights the need for a designer who crafted life with intention, as described in Psalm chapter 139 verse 14. "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well." Conclusion. Co-option is just handwaving in biology. In conclusion, co-option is a speculative and unsupported explanation for the origin of complex biological systems. Despite its frequent use in evolutionary arguments, there is no step-by-step molecular proof for co-option in the biological literature. The failure to demonstrate functional intermediates and coordinated changes further weakens the case for co-option as an explanation for irreducibly complex systems. Intelligent design offers a far more plausible explanation for the origin of complexity in biology. The intricate and interdependent nature of biological systems points to a designer, not random, unguided processes. As we study the complexity of life, we find increasing evidence that life was created by God, who designed the systems of life with wisdom, foresight, and purpose. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and comment below if you agree or would like to add your thoughts. If you would like me to respond to your comment, please make a level 1 comment directly below the video. I will respond to all polite level 1 comments even if it takes me a while, due to other commitments.